The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramée. Live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for Monday, June 29th, 2020. It's my wedding anniversary. Happy wedding anniversary to my dear wife. I cannot say I'm a newlywed anymore, but I'm thinking of you all day long, of course, as it is our first wedding anniversary. Now that my personal interesting stuff is out of the way, Duane, how are you today?
I'm doing well. I guess that means there should have been the Jazz Festival in Montreal going on, because I do recall going to that before your wedding. That's too bad that is not happening this year. But what is happening this year is soccer in a weird kind of way, Kevin, and we're here to talk about it all.
Yeah, a lot of soccer is coming our way today on the show. Of course, we're going to talk about the NWSL. That's our first topic to start the show. We'll also touch on the FA Cup, and we'll touch also on MLS Is Back. Group B will, all week long, we'll talk to our friends across the league on MLS Group B. MLS is back. We have some news also from MLS, a changing of attitude towards disclosure of positive tests from MLS and some teams, and some reaction. We'll get to it in the second half of the show, but we'll start the show today, Duane, by just acknowledging the weekend of NWSL games. Two games happened this weekend. The North Carolina Courage versus the Portland Thorns, 2-1 for the Courage, and also the Chicago Red Stars and the Washington Spirit 2-1. A lot of controversy coming out of the game. Of course, the aspect of kneeling and the Black Lives Matter before the game created a lot of controversy when some players weren't kneeling, some were kneeling. People on both sides of the divide, which it's not like we're not going to take either side, because there's no sides. It's not a question here. And that created a lot of controversy. Pictures that are making the round across the wire of newspapers on Monday morning. Controversial statement from Alexi Lawless have been taken down. They've deleted their tweet, Alexi Lawless, and he has put an apology statement out. Controversial times that unfortunately took away from the message, in my opinion, and of course took away from the great results also. Black Lives Matter and great soccer were played this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about both. I wouldn't say we talked a lot about BLM, but we have talked about it. We're part of the world, and we talk about things like that. I think our position is pretty clear that we're supportive of the protests and the message behind them. And I think more importantly, as it relates to this, Kevin, we've talked about national anthems and how, at least speaking for myself, I think that the time for them to be played before club games, has long passed. This was brought in, and for those who don't know the history of it, they started playing this during the war, like the World War, to pump up patriotism and try and, sell support bonds for the troops type stuff. And it just sort of became a tradition that stayed after. And look, I have been a part of some pretty uplifting national anthems through the days. MLS Cup final both times here in Toronto, because it was a Canadian team and we were Canadian fans, was a very emotional thing to be part of, for sure. National team games, but that's different, I think. But when it comes to just TFC v RSL on a Wednesday night in July, back when those things happened, it was just something to get through before you could watch the game or go to the canteen, right? In this protest, I support their message, but all we're hearing now, at least all I've seen now, is noise and people yelling, well, how dare you get mad at people that stood during this and didn't kneel? And there's a point to that, but at the same time, it's just blurring the message. And I'm not too sure why they're even playing these anthems in front of no one at this point. It doesn't make any damn sense.
Who's standing up? There's no fans. So I agree with you on the whole sense of the anthem also. And it's not about the country, for or against, patriotism, nationalism, activism. Yes, it's a great way to use a platform you have, and when it's one of the only ones that you can make a stand with as a professional athlete and truly make waves, you use it. But also, when we look at the Champions League, which is a revered tournament, revered league in this world of soccer, you do not have national anthems. You do have the tournament anthem, the Champions League anthem, and we all know how we feel when we hear the it's almost more visceral than the actual national anthem itself. And then you hear the champions. I got goosebumps, and it's just myself talking to a camera. So, there's something to be said about creating an identity. And MLS has that with the new anthem by Hans Zimmer. How about you put a little bit more weight into that anthem and make it the anthem before every MLS game and the only anthem?
Yeah, look, and I think soccer as a sport in general in North America is the sport that is most likely to drop the anthems first, simply because, as you say, it is not a tradition in European leagues. We don't see it in the Premier League, which is a league that most people that listen to our show will watch at least a little bit. We don't see it in the Champions League, as you mentioned. The Champions League anthem is a special one to a lot of people. I have a different relationship to it because of my distrust of UEFA, but that's my own.
And Man City. And Man City's results over the years in the Champions League, but yes, of course.
Well, no, not the results. It's the way UEFA.
True.
A different shelf. Put that on a shelf. Don't go around. Anyway, but yeah, it certainly is. It invokes something. You know that something's starting when you hear it. I'll agree with that 100%. I think national anthems have a role for finals. I think there's something special about that, and you see that in England before the FA Cup final. God Save the Queen is sang. I think it's fine to have national anthems for finals, and that will give me that TFC moment again, right? But since I've been a sports fan and paying attention closely in the last 15, 20 years, trying to be more like journalist fan, all I see is problems with the anthem. And it does provide an opportunity for protest. And if you support that protest, you'll say, well, this is a great opportunity to do that. But as I always say when we're talking about protests, you've got to be careful. It's a slippery slope. Are you going to be okay if someone does it out of you don't agree with? And if you are, and you believe that in your heart of hearts, that everyone should have that chance, and you're not going to get angry at someone who says something that protests what you think is a perfectly acceptable thing, then fine, you're not a hypocrite, and good for you. You're rare, right? Most people are going to get upset if something gets said that they don't agree with in that moment. So to me, the solution is just get rid of it. And then, look, we're in Canada, so we have another unique view. And it doesn't happen a lot, but it has happened over the years. I mean, I think way back into the 90s when separatism was at a peak in your province, Kevin, that you would occasionally get boos for the Canadian national anthem for Canadians games or Nordiques games back at the time, and that would upset the rest of Canada, and there'd be a whole thing that would get up that no one really cared about in that particular setting. More to the point, I've seen, playoff games involving Canadian teams in the major leagues, whether it be the Raptors, the Jays, or the Leafs. Yes, they've made the playoff occasionally. Canadians, whatever, Flames, that's the team. You occasionally get booed by American team fans, and then it causes a whole thing, and it's just stupidity and drunkenness usually. But
it's like, we're just booing it because we're fanning, right? We're sports hating, which in a way, I guess it's all right. But what we're saying is it's not about that. And I guess just to wrap up the national anthem aspect here, I think what you highlighted by saying, are you okay with the other side of that argument that you're protesting to do the same as the same platform? And if you're reading the comments below the pictures I talked about in Newswire, then you're seeing all the hate that the players that did stay standing up during the anthem did get. And that's not okay either. And of course, we're all allowed to disagree, and sometimes it's not necessarily okay, the other side, but you do have to realize that in a democratic fashion, democratic platform, and the freedom of speech works for the person that thinks the opposite of you also.
Yeah, and look, not everyone that stood. First off, yes. I think that it is ridiculous to scream and to assume that someone that stood during the national anthems on the weekend, if we're going to address the exact firestorm that's happening right now, I think it's a little absurd to assume that you know what's inside their minds and their hearts because they chose to stand during the anthem rather than kneel. You don't know what's inside your hearts, and I think this is the great in our minds. You can only judge their actions, and their actions in this case they're just to not choose to do something that they may not feel comfortable with. And If their teammates are pushing back against that and speaking out against that, that's a different thing. If there was like a club decision to kneel and then they chose not to, that's a different thing. But in this particular case, they were probably all given the choice to stand or kneel or do what they wanted, and some chose to stand. And I do think there is some truth to they were being left hung out to dry if they truly felt strongly against the anthem as a symbol and felt there were better ways to protest. I don't agree with that. I think it's silly. I can tell you right now on a personal level, when press boxes reopen, I will not be participating in an American anthem or a Canadian anthem because I don't want to be inconsistent. I will step out of the press box for the duration of that. That's my choice, though, and anyone who wants to stand can. And I don't think that you can really say that you believe in protest and believe that people shouldn't be punished for protest and then turn around and be angry at those who choose not to protest, right? There's a bit of a disconnect there. And the point that I think overall when it relates to this show is that we're just saying is that I think we understand where these women stand in this, and we understand that this they wanted to have the opportunity to get the Black Lives Matter message out further, and I encourage that, and I encourage them to continue to do that. But I don't know whether the anthem right now is the best vehicle for doing anything, because no one hears it.
Of course.
Anymore.
And the message gets lost in the controversy. The message gets lost into the disagreement of, no, you're not doing this to my country, which in a way it's not about the message. And we're seeing that, of course, more and more. And it's the same issue we had 4 years ago in the NFL and Kaepernick and with Megan Rapinoe and the actual NWSL and U.S. men's national team. So this issue will continue to be a controversial point this week, and there's more games to come in the NWSL, and I think that's the important aspect. I will be watching on CBS All Access on regular CBS, my DVR's program too, so you're going to get 2 points from my viewership, and I suggest everyone does the same. Looking forward to the Houston Dash versus the Utah Royals tomorrow at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and also tomorrow night, the Olympic Lyon Reign, OL Reign, making their debut with this rebrand, are playing against Sky Blue FC tomorrow at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We will, of course, keep an eye on this results on the games, but also on this issue. And later today, the Women's Soccer Review podcast is recording a show with Jonathan Tannenwald, of course, and Julia Poe will be his guest today, talking about NWSL, the first weekend, and more regarding the kneeling, I would say, controversy. And even though the kneeling itself is not the controversial point, it's more the non-kneelers. It is still a point of contention, and I'm looking forward to listening to the latest edition of the Women's Soccer Review later today. Of course, Duane, there's a lot of things happening also in the world of soccer. If we continue our little look before we take our first break, we do have some games happening in England. The FA Cup, the fuck up was back, and we got a surprising late result. Surprising for Arsenal because they got a win, and it was the most Arsenal thing, going to play a replay versus Sheffield United. But no, Arsenal got the game winner late in extra time to beat Sheffield United on the road 2-1. And the reason I'm wearing my kit today is, of course, Chelsea winning 1-0 against Leicester, the right type of blue. Won on Sunday versus Leicester. The draw has happened. Also, Manchester City beating Newcastle 2-1. And we now know that because Manchester United won the day before, Man United, Chelsea is one of the semifinals in Wembley, July 18th. And the other one on July 19th, Arsenal versus Man City.
The magic of the cup, eh? Not a lot of small teams involved in the Final Four, but
nope.
That's how this thing works out. I think that I'm not even just being biased when I say this. City's probably your favorite in there. They only have a FA Cup to play for domestically, with the title now gone. Pep even said going into this that his priority for this month was to win the FA Cup, and his priority for next month obviously would be to win the Champions League, which that's a bigger priority. But nonetheless, the FA Cup is something there. And I think it was fun the way that it played out this month. And I wonder, a lot of people talk some big talk about permanent changes that will come out of the pandemic. And I think when history looks back on it, there won't be a lot of permanent changes, that a lot of things will go back to where they were. But it wouldn't shock me if the FA Cup does take the opportunity to maybe go more into a quick blast tournament form in the future. It wouldn't shock me if there's some momentum around that, because there's a lot of people that like the Champions League idea, but there's no way the Champions League's going to stay with this kind of quick move. But it wouldn't shock me down the line if they end the season with a quarterfinal, semifinal, kind of a blast over 3 weeks, rather than stretch it out like they are. That will open the schedule up a little bit more during the grind of it, and that kind of will be an interesting thing to do. Because I think that I found these FA Cup matches, even the quarterfinals, they normally would have taken place over about 5 days. They took place over 2 instead. And I think that kind of helped. And the semifinals coming so quickly on its heels, to me, makes this feel more like a tournament at the end. And it will give a lot more eyeballs because, there's not much more to watch in the the Premier League. I mean, we're watching, the CAS court decision as much as anything else to know whether it's 4 or 5.
For you, yeah, of course, yeah. Sheffield also. But, no, I agree with you. When you were talking about the short-term format for an FA Cup just a few minutes ago, what came to mind wasn't this period of the year, wasn't the quarterfinal to semifinal. It was when it's the smaller teams. Can you imagine how this could be helpful for the smaller teams if you shorten this and you make it a destination type of place? Maybe not at Wembley, because you want to keep Wembley special for the semifinal and final, for forever special it feels now. But if you have another place and you create some sort of maybe play-in type of tournament fashion, I don't know. That's what was popping to my mind. Maybe there's nothing to it, but that's the images that came into mind. Example, a Accrington Stanley having to win 3 games in 8 days or something in a local or smaller scale type of Wembley situation, close games, and then you get out of there and you're like, well, you got it out of there and you got your round 4 matchup with a Premier League team. Maybe that could be something where the first 3 rounds of the FA Cup are boom, 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 and then the Premier League comes, and the team that comes out of this has a matchup with a good team at home. Maybe that's the carrot at the end of the stick that gives you the images that we love about the FA Cup, which is like a big team like Chelsea going to play at an 8,000-seat stadiums. That's what we love to see, right? Having them changing in a small room on foldable chairs. We love the magic of that aspect of the cup.
Sure, for sure. I mean, you can see, the chip truck outside the behind the goal, right? Or
you see the guy making the fish and chip behind the goal, and there's a net so he doesn't receive the ball in the back of his head while he cooks some fish and chips. Of course, that's beautiful.
Yeah, in some town of 5,000 people, they've clearly been drinking since 1 o'clock in the afternoon. By the time kickoff rolls around, it's great. I always wished I could see that in North American context. I would have loved to see the Montreal Canadiens have to go into some back-to-back rink somewhere with all the locals.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I actually had that experience at a Canadian Championship match, and it was the one at Blainville. So you see here the Plus Fort Ensemble. This scarf here was acquired in Blainville, and it's at the equestrian, very known equestrian competition place, right? The biggest one in Quebec, or the second biggest one in Quebec anyways. So it's there they play. So I literally was walking through equestrian tracks and next to the equestrian building, and I saw York 9 come there to play. So I that gave me that feeling, of course to a smaller scale, but that's what we're talking about here.
If you listen to our 5-ring show, you know that we prefer to refer to equestrian as the horsies. But with all total respect to the horsey athletes, not as bad as the bouncy, which is my favorite event in the Summer Olympics.
That's trampoline, I guess. Yeah. The horses dressage forever is marked in my head. Oh my God, they're horses figure skating or dancing. It is beautiful.
If you don't know us, you'll think we're making fun of these sports. We, of course, are not. I know more about trampoline than I care to admit. At any rate, moving on. We're going to do a 5-ring soon, by the way. It's on the schedule. In terms of the FA Cup, there has been a lot of talk, I should say, in recent years about how to revive it. And it's like a consternation in England, because it is such an old, famous trophy. And the bigger clubs do tend to not some of them do punt on it. And I think it's not necessarily a big deal. Like, I think that the big clubs, as we just saw, like 4 of them are in the Final Four this year. There's no true underdog here. I guess you can make a joke about Arsenal or United if you want, but and I just did, I guess. But it's not really any true underdogs left. Whoever wins this will be okay. Yeah, they won the FA Cup. That makes sense. What the problem I think with this tournament is more that the high championship, low Premier League teams, they do punt it, and it kind of takes away that potential for the mid-level upsets to happen, which sort of takes a lot of the magic away from it. We get the early magic, third round, like you say, the chip truck going on, one big team goes out, and that's great, and we all love it, and we enjoy the pitch invasion and all that.
And then we forget about it. You're right.
Yeah.
Who won the FA Cup 3 years ago? Who won the FA Cup 3 years ago?
City. But
okay.
But anyway.
The example would work if I would have picked any other year, okay? But, what we remember? Remember when Sutton United made it way further? Yeah, I do. Or Carlisle. Or there's Norwich when they were in League One beating a Premier League team, Manchester United. We remember these moments more than who won the FA Cup 5 years ago and how did that happen. It all blends in. It's always the same setting. It's Wembley, blah, blah, blah. It becomes boring, and we know, blah, blah, blah. But it is a bit different when we're talking about the cup sets. So I guess you're onto something.
Yeah, by the way, it was United that won 2 years ago. City won last year. I think, it was Mourinho. Mourinho won it because he kept saying he won a treble because he won the Shield and the Shield, the Europa League, and the FA Cup. So he won a quote-unquote a treble, which he did. He won 3 trophies. That is a treble.
Poor man's treble.
Nonetheless, but yeah, it takes away the let's say Fulham taking a run this year because it's more important for Fulham to get back up, or Leeds, or teams like Watford did make a final last year, but didn't work out too well for them. But they did, so that was nice and a bit of a difference. But yeah, instead you get a couple upsets here and there, and then you get City v United. That's probably what it's likely to be, or Chelsea
Arsenal
this year. Yeah,
which is like a regular matchup of the Premier League. So no, that is true, and it's something to think about also. And I think you were onto something too when you say that things were not going to stick. Things that changed during this pandemic are not going to stick because have you heard about revenge buying and revenge shopping? Okay, I wasn't able to shop for the last 4 months. I'm going to wait in line for 5 hours to get that new pair of sneakers.
Yes, yeah.
It's a thing.
I've been thrifting a bit more than usual. No, the world, sports is not going to remarkably change. They're even bending over backwards, Kevin, to try and get these things squeezed in now, so next year can be normal. We were saying early on in the pandemic, and I still maintain this would have been the better way to do it, would have been to wait till it was gone almost and finish the season. Don't scrap the season, just wait. Especially with the North American sports, why the NHL and the NBA are trying to rush back to get a playoff in summer is beyond me. They should just wait till it's damn well done and then just finish the season. And then you start the next season and you squeeze that, you change the next season. But they are not interested in that. They are interested in getting this the hell out of the way so that they can get a full 82 games in next year. And I don't understand that logic because most of us only care about the playoffs anyway when we're talking about this.
How about we just have a playoff? How about we forget about the regular season? Maybe that's what we need in sports, Forget about the whole thing. Just have sports in all different times. You have 3 months of MLS, 3 months of NHL, and you have overlapping weeks here and there to make everything work. But how about we just have playoffs? That would be so awesome. Every sport would be so, that would be so awesome for some reason.
Maybe a bit of an extreme example, but yes, we have heard other talk, and I do think a league like the CanPL, if we could bring that in for a second, might seriously look at having using this, whatever they end up doing in Charlottetown or Victoria, which we think is going to be an 18 tournament, might be making it some kind of annual event, and I've advocated for that, and there is opportunity, but I do think that sports, if you look at sports in general, it's a conservative thing. This has always worked. We can't possibly do it any other way. And we still even see stuff like this. Oh my God, the world is going to end if we add, golden goal in soccer 20 years ago, and it we got to get that out quick because it's different and we don't like it.
Yeah.
And I'm guilty of it with VAR, but in my defense, VAR is garbage. So it's all a resistance towards change, right? I admit with baseball, when we're talking about multiple sports, I might as well continue. With baseball, I hated it when they expanded the playoffs, even though it made it more likely that the teams that I liked would make it in, because to me, baseball was always 4 teams. But then again, I think about it, it was 2 teams before that for a long time.
Exactly.
My dad would remember that, right?
Yeah, it was just the National League and the American League. Anyways, on that note, we'll give you a break to think about these possible scenarios, and we'll be back to talk about MLS Is Back, Group B, and to look at the latest news in Major League Soccer.
Ya lo hace.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Kevin Laramée with Duane, Rollins. By the way, we hope you enjoyed the first half of this show. NWSL, we're happy to have the Women's Soccer Review back later today with a new edition with Jonathan Tannenwald, going even deeper in the world of the NWSL of last weekend and the controversy. And that will be available later today. But Duane and I are back. We'll look at Group B today. We're looking at MLS Is Back, the tournament. Duane, before we actually talk about the MLS Is Back and the possibility, cases in Florida have not stopped coming, and I just got the latest number. According to Orlando Sentinel, 5,855 new cases over the last 24 hours in Florida. That's the confirmed cases. You can get more details. It's a bit down from Friday and the weekend, which had an average of 10,000 or 9,000 one day, 8,800 the other day. Those are just the latest number. MLS has provided now some positive tests from players. 18 players and staff right now have tested positive during their stay in Orlando. There's also the protocol that have been made public. What happens if a player or a staff of MLS Is Back is found to be positive? They're isolated in the hotel area, but in a way that it's more isolated, and they stay that way until they test negative or until they have been proven that it was a false positive. So that's the latest, if you want to say, in COVID related numbers in the region of Florida's and MLS's new, I guess, open policy of positive tests, which all the way to yesterday, teams were not obligated to mention. Actually, they were strongly suggested to not necessarily make it public, the positive tests from their teams.
Yeah, look, I'm not completely convinced they're embracing openness, although it is good that they put these numbers out here. I was on the press call on Fridays, so I had an opportunity to listen in anyway to the bubble, to get my little eye and peek through the bubble. But it's very controlled, what the message we're getting from there, right? So Tommy Thompson from the Earthquakes is on there, and they asked him 2 or 3 times in different languages even whether he felt safe in that bubble, and he kept saying yes. But I suspect that the players are coached to answer these questions in a certain way, because it's not like we can pull them aside as reporters and ask questions on the side or get background stuff. But that's the Athletic are getting that background stuff, and there is some concerns that are certainly emulating out of the bubble. And not everyone from San Jose arrived there, and I suspect
not everyone from Dallas is leaving Dallas. So there's not everyone from all the cities are leaving to go to the bubble. So there's something there. Also, do you remember, was it in a Mission Impossible movie, that you actually look at someone on TV, they're saying the right words, but if you actually look and read the lips, they're saying another message? Should we read the lips of Tommy Thompson, and is he asking for help?
Yeah, it looked like exactly. I
blink twice if you need help. Was it Mission Impossible? I don't know. Speaking of, can someone tell me what the F the rabbit foot was? I'm still wondering that from 20 years ago from Mission Impossible 3. Anyway,
just quickly, there's some Plane Geek. I think he probably, whoever this was, would agree that he's a plane geek. Tracked down all the MLS flights into Orlando. So if you're curious when the Whitecaps, Impact, and TFC are arriving, they're basically, the Whitecaps are flying in on Wednesday. The Impact are flying in on Friday night, and TFC is arriving on Saturday afternoon. So the Canadian teams are staying boat as long as they can, which probably is indicative of the fact that there was how many cases in Orange County last week or yesterday?
In Orange County, last weekend, at least last Friday, in Orange County itself, there was over 500 cases. So, yeah.
More than the entire area of Canada. So, they're going to stay as long as they can.
Exactly. July 2nd is the day that the Impact will move to the bubble in Orlando, and we'll have more. It's an ever-evolving situation. MLS Is Back is scheduled to start on July 8th, and I say scheduled because still a lot of time to go before July 8th, and we'll see what happens. Let's look at Group B. All week long, we'll break down a bit more team by team. Today, it's the overlook of Group B, and you see Group D and Group F also on your screen because it is the Western Conference. By the way, if you hear me say screen, you're listening on the podcast, like, oh yeah, youtube.com/sports podcasting network, but we're also live on Twitter at Soccer Today SPN. This is where we broadcast live, and the live version of this show is now posted also on our YouTube page every day, youtube.com/sports podcasting network, the audio anywhere you get your podcasts, and also on our website, sportspodcastingnetwork.com. Seattle, Dallas, Vancouver, San Jose. We know San Jose could be a dark horse in this group with Matias Almeida. Could a tactical genius, that's what he was touted as when he was in Mexico, and we've seen some glimpse of his tactical genius in the beginning of his tenure, in the middle of his tenure with San Jose. Could we see this being really helpful in a short-term tournament situation? Could a team like Vancouver, that has a striker that usually can get hot, can put a few goals in short amount of time, as Lucas Cavallini, and maybe create a big difference here? Do we see Dallas? We'll see. Is Fafa Pico going to be there? It's a big piece of this team. What's going to happen with Dallas? That's another interesting situation. And of course, Seattle, one of the favorites of this entire tournament. But will the years of success all the way to Major League Soccer final 3 times in 4 years, plus their injuries and the turnaround of players and everything, will this matter, or does the last 4 months of recovery really help a team like Seattle to perform on a short-term basis? I guess we'll think about the same thing when we look at Toronto in the next week. But Seattle, Dallas, Vancouver, San Jose, a group that does have one clear-cut favorite, but then who knows?
Yeah, a lot of people, there's a lot of different theories floating around out there, but I think you can almost put them into 2 camps for the most part. There are those that believe, sort of 3 camps. There are those that believe that the warm weather teams are going to be the ones that succeed the most. I completely disagree with that. I think that everyone's going to adjust to the same situation down there because they're going to be in the same bubble forever, and I don't think there's enough sort of muscle memory, so to speak, that it's really going to matter for a bunch of teams that are getting put together, and come in and out and all that sort of jazz. I don't put a lot of stock in the hot theory. There's the young theory that's out there, which if you subscribe to the young theory, then FC Dallas will be your choice here because they do have a lot of younger players. It is a younger roster. Can younger players stay healthy? Is there an advantage against the old graybeards, right? I understand that one more than the hot theory, but I also don't subscribe to it. I am in the third camp, which is the veteran theory, the graybeard theory. I think that the older teams, the more mature and established teams, and we're using older relatively here. These are sports teams. They're not 80. They're 30 or 27. At any rate, I think that they're going to be the successful teams. So when you look at Group B, obviously we kind of check a lot of the boxes here. Dallas checks that hot box and the young box, so maybe you want to pick them as a dark horse, and a lot of people are. San Jose, certainly they're kind of in a warmer area, but a little Northern California isn't as blazing hot as you'd think, so I wouldn't necessarily put them in any box. But as you mentioned, they've got that other wild card there of they play a very unique style. But can they play that style in the hot weather in Orlando? That's an interesting question, and one that I'm going to have to noodle on a little bit before I truly pick them to go deep into this. But the one team I'm not afraid of are the Sounders, because no matter what they say, what noise they have, what kind of veteran force they have, all that jazz, whether they're sick of, whether they're burnt out, I don't buy it. I think the Sounders win. The Sounders are going to go into this to win everything like they always do, and are absolutely one of the favorites. I would be shocked if they don't get out of this group. I would be shocked if they don't get out of this group with 9 points or 7 or 7 or 9 points.
7 or 9, yeah. Undefeated for sure. Like, I think we're both seeing Seattle being undefeated through this, which, you know what that means? It means they might go winless because, MLS is back. Usually, if tournament goes like MLS goes, usually doesn't happen like we think it is. But, this is the beauty of this type of tournament. It's something that is unique, and we never had to handicap club teams like this in a format like this, and this is kind of unique and fun, and we both agree Seattle is our choice from clear-cut favorite in this group. Dallas, Vancouver, San Jose, that's the fascinating point. You can give good arguments for 2 of these 3, and then you have Vancouver, and Vancouver, of course, off the field hasn't been smooth sailing, especially with the firing of Mark Panis over the last few months now, and all the situation over the last decade behind the closed doors and all. But on the pitch or on the sideline, there's Marc Dos Santos, and we have seen Marc Dos Santos being able to do amazing tactical things in the past in the lower leagues of North America, in, of course, the NASL and eventually in the USL also. But his best moment as a manager in North America was in the NASL with the Fury, with the San Francisco Deltas, and we're talking about the Montreal Impact also back in the USL and NASL days before he was done with the Impact and moved on to Brazil. So there's a possibility that his tactics also in a short sample size could create surprising results. So Vancouver, I can see them squeak out of this group, maybe not as second, but maybe as best third. But I can see Vancouver being the best third with maybe 4 points, having a shot of coming out of this.
Well, anything's possible. Look, they are a team in transition. Putting aside their problems off the pitch, it will be, I think, an advantage for the Whitecaps to not be in the home market for a while. Speaking of which, real quickly, there has been some movement in Canada that may permit home market games in the fall. If MLS does move to that, that is something we'll keep an eye on the days forward. So it's not impossible that we won't see games up here pulled in front of closed doors, but nonetheless games in the home market. But right now, the Whitecaps, a little break. Everyone needs a little break from each other right there. So that's probably better for them. Of course, they could grab some points in this. They got a win already in this season. We shouldn't forget. So that's something. The players may look at all the negativity, toxicity around them and galvanize themselves. Marc Dos Santos, I think, is a very driven coach and is going to be a very prepared coach when it comes to a tournament like this. He's going to have probably been nothing but, he's been in for 3 months. He's been running Zoom training sessions and doing nothing but watching film, right? So I'm sure he knows the Dallas, since this got drawn, he knows Dallas, Seattle, and San Jose like the back of his hand. But there's a talent deficit with the Whitecaps, so you'd be a little bit contrarian to not pick them last. But as you said, who knows with this format and what's going to happen. It is a fairly balanced group. There's one other quick advantage I did notice on a quick glance here. Both the 2 best teams, I think, in most people's minds are Seattle and Dallas. Both of those teams have to do a 9 a.m. drop in the middle of this, which is going to twist their schedule up. They play the 9th, the 9th, 10th, 15th, and 20th are the game dates on this. The 15th of July, Seattle and Dallas play a 9 a.m. game, which is rare for the West Coast teams to have to play that 9 a.m. game, but they are. And they're going to have played at 10:30 before that. Vancouver's going to be in 10:30 across the board. So I actually think that kind of schedule flip might play a greater role than people are considering. There's not travel in this event, but there is flip with the body. And getting that 9 a.m. game, it's going to be very interesting to see what teams adjust to it the best. It's not every day, but it is certainly one that's going to be a factor. And as I said, Seattle and Dallas have to play the 1:09 a.m. start. Vancouver's at the evening all the time, so they don't have to change their schedule at any point. Maybe that's an advantage, something to think about. We're going to have Dan Ritchie on tomorrow, Kevin, to talk about the Whitecaps in detail. For once, I think we're going to have primarily a scoreboard conversation with Dan about the Whitecaps.
There's 24 hours to go. There's still another day to go. The Whitecaps have time to do something that we need to talk about tomorrow. No offense. That's just I'm just kidding. It's just a joke. But tomorrow.
Maybe you are.
Maybe we are. Yeah, but on that note, we'll take the rest of the day to ponder Group B and come back tomorrow to focus on the Vancouver Whitecaps later today on the network, the Sports Podcast Network. The latest episode of the Women's Soccer Review Podcast with Jonathan Tannenwald talking to soccer journalist Julia Poe on all the ramifications coming out of this weekend of the NWSL Challenge Cup and more on the Women's Soccer Review Podcast, available everywhere you get your podcasts. Also the same for Soccer Today. Please subscribe, like our YouTube page. Subscribe if you like the video you're watching on YouTube. Please, right now, subscribe right here. Like our pages and also our podcast feed if you like, and subscribe and rate. It actually helps us more. Sports is back, and we're happy to talk about soccer and sports, and we cannot wait to continue on this journey with all of you. But as always, until tomorrow, for Duane Rollins, I'm Kevin Laramée. We wish you a great soccer.